Do you remember the first time you saw Logan 5 standing inside the Dome City, surrounded by dazzling coloured lights, youthful smiling faces, and the silent countdown clock blinking on the palm of his hand? Back then, Logan's Run looked like a strange science fiction dream, a clean, pleasure-driven world where death was given a beautiful name renewal. But did you know that the film we have been watching for nearly half a century also exists in another form, darker, colder, and far harder to accept? For almost 50 years, Logan's Run has had entire moments erased by MGM scenes. The studio deemed too dangerous for mainstream audiences. An opening sequence in which Francis executes a runner amid cheering crowds. An intimate relationship between Logan and Jessica that crosses the boundary of romance, and even a funeral honouring blind loyalty, all wiped away to transform a moral nightmare into a palatable sci-fi spectacle. 7 deleted scenes, each one a crucial fragment revealing just how dark Logan's Run was meant to be if audiences had been allowed to see it in full. Hit like to open the door. MGM slammed shut in 1976. 7. The deleted opening scene. Francis executes a runner before a crowd. For years, every time Logan's Run began, all I ever saw were cold lines of narration drifting across the screen, neatly explaining the rules of this world in a controlled, almost scientific manner. A familiar, safe opening just enough to let you settle into your seat and accept that you were entering a carefully managed work of fiction. No violence, no moral shock, no reason to look away. But the truth is that was not how Logan's Run originally began. In the first cut, the film opens in the middle of a crowded plaza where everyday life is still unfolding. A panicked runner bursts through the crowd with Francis in his role as a Sandman pursuing him at close range. There is no warning music, no merciful cutaway. The hunt unfolds raw and exposed right in front of everyone. The truly chilling moment is not the fatal shot, but the crowd's reaction. When the runner collapses, the people around him cheer and applaud as if they have just witnessed a legitimate form of entertainment. Death is not hidden, not avoided, it is welcomed and worse enjoyed. From the very first seconds, the film states plainly this society does not merely accept killing, it has learned to take pleasure in it. According to those who saw the test screening, the opening left the theatre in complete silence. Not because of graphic violence, but because it offered no moral escape for the audience. No one in that world is innocent. No one stands outside it, and Francis is not a villain. He is simply carrying out what society itself celebrates. MGM reacted almost immediately. In the studio's eyes, the opening was too bleak, too direct, and most dangerously, it made the entire world of Logan's Run impossible to empathise with from the very first minute. If audiences hated this society too early, they would not want to stay with the film. And so the opening was removed, entirely replaced by detached narration, clean abstract, and far safer. From that moment on, Logan's Run was sanitized at its foundation. The world on screen became a flawed system in need of correction, rather than a community that had consciously abandoned its moral compass. And audiences entered the story unaware that the very first scene they were never allowed to see was the most honest warning the film ever dared to deliver. 6. The drenched Jessica scene that revealed Sanctuary was not safe. Have you ever wondered about a small but strange detail in Logan's Run? Why Jessica suddenly appears soaked to the skin, as if she has just survived something serious. Yet the film offers no explanation. The moment passes so quickly you might miss it, and Sanctuary remains in memory as a peaceful destination. A final refuge after all the chaos. What audiences never knew is that the scene explaining Jessica's drenched appearance once existed, and it made Sanctuary far more frightening. So frightening that MGM decided to erase it completely, as if the film had never dared to go there at all. In the original cut, when Logan and Jessica reach the outside community, they are not greeted with kindness. A woman in Sanctuary approaches them warmly, appearing willing to help, only to soon reveal her intent to betray them. The confrontation erupts quickly, chaotically, and without heroic staging or musical cues. During the struggle, Jessica is shoved and falls straight into a deep, freezing body of water, disappearing from the frame for several seconds, long enough for Logan to believe she is dead. The camera in this scene does not linger on action, but on unease. Sanctuary is not paradise, just another society, one where people still mistrust, betray, and are willing to sell out the vulnerable to protect themselves. There is no clear boundary between inside the dome and the free world, as audiences had been led to believe. A member of the editing team later recalled that this scene made the test screening unusually heavy. Viewers did not feel relief when Logan escaped the city, they felt unsettled. And that was precisely what MGM did not want. A sci-fi entertainment film was not allowed to end with the feeling that nowhere is safe. The decision came swiftly. The entire sequence was removed, leaving only the small after effect of Jessica appearing inexplicably soaked. Sanctuary was thus cleaned up into a vague symbol of hope, rather than a colder, more disturbing moral question. Many critics believe that had this scene remained, Logan's run would carry a very different message. Not escape is enough, but that freedom never comes with guarantees. And precisely because it was too honest, the unsafe sanctuary scene was deleted, so audiences could be allowed to believe in a paradise even though it never truly existed. 5. Logan and Jessica. The deleted intimate scene that crossed a line. When watching the film, whenever Logan and Jessica appear together, we tend to remember them as a couple on the run through a cold future world. Not overly passionate, but close enough to suggest companionship. A safe relationship, typical of 1970s sci-fi, moderate tension, restrained romance, nothing to make anyone uncomfortable. But in the original cut, their closeness went much further. The deleted footage shows their relationship reaching a level of physical intimacy that is far more explicit, and not as a purely voluntary moment, but one shaped by a deeply uneven power dynamic. In the original version, Logan does not approach Jessica as a man seeking connection, but as a sandman holding power over her fate. He knows Jessica is a runner. He knows the system behind him. And he knows that every choice she makes, staying cooperating or fleeing, exists under the shadow of that authority. Their intimacy is therefore never neutral from the very first moment. The early scenes require no violence or overt threats. They are dangerous. In another way, an unnaturally slow pace, prolonged closeness, and lingering looks held longer than necessary enough to make the audience feel the imbalance. Jessica is not fully free beside Logan, and Logan is not entirely innocent in moving closer. This intimacy is not romantic. It is a grey zone where protection and control no longer have a clear boundary. That implication is precisely why MGM intervened, not because the imagery was explicit, but because the moral suggestion was too dangerous. Their protagonist was not merely a victim of the system, but someone actively using it to create intimacy. For a film that needed audiences to stand with Logan, this was a line that could not be crossed. When these scenes were softened or removed, Logan lost his original unsettling edge, but it was not replaced with a fully realized path of redemption. He became a vaguely cold character whose transformation happens too quickly, leaving audiences sensing a rupture without understanding its cause. What should have been a painful awakening to power and guilt was compressed into a few weightless transitions. Today, Logan and Jessica's relationship is often remembered as a simple sci-fi romance. But in the version audiences were never allowed to see, it was something far more uncomfortable. A story about dependency, about power disguised as protection, and about the moment a person begins to realize that they are not only being manipulated by the system, but are becoming part of it. 4. The ice cave and the deleted intimate moment. Do you remember the scene where Logan and Jessica step into the ice cave, cold blue light washing over them? Everything so still that the film's rhythm almost seems to disappear. It is a beautiful, strange scene, but also one that left many viewers with a faint sense that something was missing, as if the film had skimmed past. A moment it should have lingered on. That feeling was not imagined. In the original cut of Logan's Run, the ice cave was not merely a place of shelter, but a crucial, intimate pause. A sequence of actions, glances, and physical closeness that was removed entirely, leaving an emotional gap. The theatrical version never truly fills. Into the early cut, the ice cave is not just an unusual hideout, but the first real emotional stillness shared by Logan and Jessica. There is a segment in which they are forced to remove their heavy clothing because of the cold, not as display, but as an act of survival. The robot inside the cave begins forming blocks of ice slowly, meticulously, as if it were copying the image of the two humans standing before it. And within that quiet space, there is a brief kiss, not passionate, not hurried, but enough to mark a boundary that has just been crossed. What makes this scene sensitive is not the action itself, but its timing. This is not a conventional romantic moment, it is the first time their closeness escapes the shadow of pursuit and power becoming an emotional choice. The kiss does not say that everything is resolved, it only whispers we are changing. When MGM removed this entire sequence, they did not merely cut an intimate scene. They erased a psychological transition. In the theatrical version, audiences see Logan and Jessica grow closer in later scenes, but without knowing why. Their bond appears without an origin point, making their emotions seem spontaneous rather than forged in silence and danger. In the version, audiences saw the ice cave remains only a beautiful setting. But in the original cut, it was where their relationship first transformed from companionship born of circumstance into attachment born of choice. And when that moment was removed, the film lost a crucial step in its development. The true reason Logan and Jessica stop merely running together and begin staying for one another. 3. Scheduled sex and the pleasure society that was softened. In the memories of many viewers, the sexual elements in Logan's Run pass by, quickly serving almost as decoration for the future world. Soft lighting and open atmosphere, people touching without taboo. This is why the Dome City is often remembered as a liberated place, a society that has moved beyond old moral restraints. But in the early cut, sex was not framed that way. In the original version, physical relationships are presented as part of a standardized daily rhythm, more like a social routine than a personal choice. They occur regularly, quickly, without emotional build-up, and leave no residue afterward. No one asks names. No one waits for a next meeting. Each encounter is designed not to form memories deep enough to linger. It is precisely this emotionless repetition that makes the scenes unsettling. Sex in the Dome City is not forbidden. On the contrary, it is encouraged, even standardized. What is tightly controlled is the capacity for attachment. People are allowed physical closeness, but not bonds strong enough to pull them out of the predetermined social cycle. The love spaces in the early cut therefore feel very different. They resemble public services more than private rooms, orderly, clean, anonymous. There is no trace of personal life, no sense of belonging. Everything is structured so intimacy can occur, but only within limits, and always ending before it can become something deeper. This moral implication is precisely why MGM softened these scenes. Not because the imagery crossed a line, but because the meaning was too cold. This is not a sexually liberated society, but one that has turned sex into a mechanism for regulating collective emotion. When all connections are short-lived, people suffer less, but they also question less. They attach less, and therefore resist less. When these scenes were shortened in the theatrical cut, the Dome City began to resemble a harmless pleasure paradise. Sex appeared as a personal right. Openness looked like freedom. What audiences lost was the film's core critique that a society does not need violence to control people, it only needs to make every relationship temporary. In the cut version, sex is color. In the original version, it is mechanism. And when that mechanism is concealed, Logan's Run no longer asks its most uncomfortable question: is a society that lets you touch everyone but never lets you stay with anyone. truly free or merely a more refined form of control disguised as pleasure? 2. The Cubs and the cut truth. Outside is no safer than inside. There is a moment in Logan's run that many viewers remember, but cannot quite remember why it passes so quickly. It is Logan and Jessica's encounter with the Cubs, the survivors living outside the Dome City. Everything unfolds rapidly, chaotically, and ends before it can leave any real aftertaste. You register that the outside world is dangerous, but you never truly feel it. That haste was not accidental. In the original cut of Logan's run, the confrontation with the Cubs was not a brief interlude, but a full chapter of the film. Logan and Jessica are not attacked once, but stalked, surrounded, and hunted over a long enough stretch for audiences to feel genuine instability. The Cubs appear as a group that has lost all social conventions, where violence is not a last resort, but a first reflex. In this version, the outside world carries no sense of liberation. It is raw, unstable, lawless, differing from the Dome City, not in how dangerous it is, but in how that danger manifests. If the inside represents cold control, the outside is unpredictable chaos, and Logan, with all his Sandman skills, discovers that he holds no advantage once rules disappear. That contrast is precisely what made this sequence too heavy for the pacing MGM wanted. A prolonged confrontation with the Cubs strips the escape narrative of any upward momentum and replaces it with stagnation. Nowhere is better than anywhere else. That is why the sequence was aggressively shortened in the theatrical release. When these scenes vanished, the Cubs became a brief, almost illustrative obstacle. The outside world lost its genuine sense of threat, and Logan and Jessica's escape shifted from survival to adventure. Audiences were no longer forced to confront the fear that leaving the system might not be the answer. And that is the most important thing lost in this sequence. The original cut did not promise freedom beyond the Dome City. It offered a colder truth instead. When order collapses, people do not automatically become better, they simply become less predictable. 1. Francis's funeral. The deleted tragedy of absolute loyalty. There is something strange in the way audiences remember Francis. He dies very quickly and disappears even faster. A stubborn antagonist, a fanatical Sandman removed so the story can move forward. No one mourns him. No one pauses. The film seems to want you to forget him the moment he falls. But in the original cut of Logan's run, Francis did not vanish like that. After Francis's death, the film once included a brief funeral scene, cold, orderly, and entirely impersonal. It was not an emotional farewell, but a ritual of the system. Francis is recorded, processed, and placed into his final position as a Sandman who has fulfilled his duty. No one asks who he was beyond that role. It is in this moment that the true meaning of Francis's character becomes clear. He is not a villain because he is cruel, but because he is absolutely loyal. He believes in the rules. He believes in Carousel. He believes that killing runners is the right action to preserve order. Francis does not resist the system. He is the ideal model the system creates and uses until nothing is left. And that is precisely why this funeral scene was too dangerous. It forces the audience to confront an uncomfortable truth. Francis is not fundamentally different from Logan at the starting point. The only difference is that Logan begins to doubt in time, Francis does not. When the system honours Francis in death, the film states plainly, this is the fate reserved for perfect obedience. MGM removed the entire sequence, not because it was too long or too violent, but because it collapses the familiar good versus evil boundary. If Francis is seen as a victim, then Logan is no longer simply an awakened hero. He is someone who escaped by chance before being crushed in exactly the same way. When the funeral scene was deleted, Francis was restored to the role popular cinema prefers: a villain who must be defeated. The character lost his tragic depth, and the message about the cost of blind loyalty was weakened. Audiences were no longer forced to ask what the most terrifying thing in this world truly is: the rules themselves, or the people willing to believe in those rules until the very end. in the version that was never released. Francis is not the loser of the story. He is its final warning. And because that warning was too clear, too cold, it was erased so that Logan's run could end as an escape rather than an indictment of those who always follow the rules. When all the deleted scenes of Logan's run are placed back together, one thing becomes unmistakably clear. This film was not cut because it was too violent, but because it was too honest. Honest about death being encouraged as entertainment. Honest about sex being turned into a tool of management. Honest about a society where absolute loyalty is not rewarded, but consumed until it is exhausted. The deleted scenes do not merely remove details, they redirect the moral compass of the entire story. What was once a survival journey between two nightmares became an adventure toward the light. And in that new, watchable version, the film's sharpest warning was buried. So what about you? If you could watch the version of Logan's run that was never released, where death is not concealed, sex is not freedom and loyalty leads straight to tragedy, would you want to see it, or would you still choose the more comfortable version we have come to know? Leave your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you won't miss the next videos to come.